Viking penguin. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And that's how I came to stand here. And I look out at y'all, and I hope I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and this is just some dream, and I'm going to be back writing ads about desks and chairs. And when I went home and decided that I was going to write, I'm just going to give you a little background and then I'll read. I had, when I was 9 years old, I took the train from Ohio to Danville, Kentucky, because I was invited to visit my great-aunt Mildred Caldwell. And I'm a farm girl. I've never been anywhere. I mean, except the grocery store and to school and the woods and into the barn and to play with the animals. I didn't know what to expect. And my aunt picked me up in a big black Buick, and tiny little woman, and she's driving me through town. And there's these towering trees and these magnificent old homes. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And she pulls into this driveway, and up ahead of me is this mammoth white house, Greek Revival, surrounded by gardens and big trees. And she turned to me and said, "Here we are, sugar." I just didn't even know what to think. And she took me in, and there were antiques everywhere, and oriental rugs that were so old that parts of them were threadbare. And she had these Scotty dogs. They ran free, and they're chewing on the fringe of the rugs, and she doesn't care. And it was just the most magical thing I'd ever seen in my life. She said, "Oh, you can touch anything, do anything you want." Oh, she was wonderful. And I did notice that she always used her good china and silver at dinner. And you know, at the farm, what my mama had was only brought out for holidays. It was never used any other time. And I finally got the nerve to ask my great aunt about it, and she said, "Sugar, every day is special. So we just have this every day. This is our special time every day." And I never forgot that. Well, my aunt had a cook and housekeeper named Betty. Now remember, I'm a farm girl from Ohio. I have never in my life had any interaction with an African American. I fell in love with Betty. I loved her dialect. I loved her attitude. I was enthralled with her. And I wanted to keep hanging around the kitchen, and she was real busy, and she'd shuffle around doing her thing, and she was a wonderful cook. Well, one day I was just kind of snooping, listening to Betty talk to the gardener. And she was telling him that someone in town had really hurt her feelings. And he said, "Well, Betty, what are you going to do?" And she took a pan out of a drawer and slammed it on the stove. And then there was a moment of silence. She said, "Well, I could stay mad, but that'd just take too much time out of my day." And I never forgot that it's just not worth it to stay mad for longer than a day. So I try not to stay longer than a day. It's just not mad anymore. Thanks to Betty. So I thought I was going to write about that experience when I wrote. And I had a whole Word document out, and I had everything going. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before from another author, because I know it's not unique to me. But one night, it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm working on this and having a ball, and my life changed because I heard a voice in my head, and then I saw in my head a little girl come in and sit down, and she tightened her knees around her hands. And that was Cece Honeycutt. And she told me the beginning of her story, and I was floored. And I thought, well, this is a lot better than what I'm writing. I have a Mac. I just took that document and dragged it to the trash and opened up a new Word document and began. And it was truly a magical moment, and it can happen to any of us, whether we're gardening, writing, painting, anything we're doing. There's magic there for us to grab hold of. And that's what happened, and I chose to grab hold of it. I didn't know where she was taking me, but it was her voice. And then when I heard her story, I couldn't believe it. And with Cece, I knew that I had something. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I knew I had something. And the joy of this is, I don't know how many of you have read the story, but it's very sad, and it's also very funny, and it's balanced with that. And I personally think it's more funny than sad, but we have to get through what happened to Cece. And my husband this evening tried to talk me into giving away the best chapter of the whole book and thought I should read it. And then after I had heart palpitations and thought, I can't do this, we finally discussed it, and he said, I shouldn't have said a word, because it's the funniest chapter in the book, and I was going to read it to you, but I thought if I did that, I'd just wreck the whole thing. So I'm not going to read that chapter to you, except I will say this, it does involve slugs. Garden slugs. Big ones.
It's a great chapter.
That's a good one.
So I thought that I'd give you Cece's voice and how she sounds. And I'm not going to read to you a long time because I've been to enough author events where I think they take it too far, and everybody in the audience is saying, will you shut up? Will you please shut up? So I'm not going to do that to you. So you don't have to sit there and go, oh, here she goes. I'm going to keep it short and sweet, just so you can hear Cece's voice. Mama left her red satin shoes in the middle of the road. That's what 3 eyewitnesses told the police. But the first time I remember Mama wearing red shoes was on a snowy morning in December of 1962, the year I was 7 years old. I walked into the kitchen and found her sitting at the table. No lights were on, but in the thin haze of dawn that pushed through the frostbitten window, I could see red high-heeled shoes peeking out from beneath the hem of her robe. There was no breakfast waiting and no freshly ironed school dress hanging on the basement doorknob. Mama just sat and stared out the window with empty eyes, her hands limp in her lap and her coffee cold and untouched. I stood by her side and breathed in the sweet scent of lavender talcum powder that clung to the tufts of her robe. What's the matter, Mama? Well, I waited and waited, and finally she turned from the window and looked at me. Her skin was as frail as tissue, and her voice wasn't much more than a whisper. Cecilia Rose, I'm taking you to Georgia. I want you to see what real living is like. All the women dress so nice, and the people are kind and friendly. It's so different from how things are up here. As soon as I feel better, we'll plan a trip. Just you and me. But what about Daddy? Will he come too? Mama squeezed her eyes closed and didn't answer. Mama stayed sad for the rest of the winter, and just when I thought she'd never smile again, spring came. When the lilacs bloomed in great fluffy waves of violet, Mama went outside and cut bouquets for every room in the house. She painted her fingernails bright pink, fixed her hair, and slipped into a flowery print dress. From room to room she dashed. She turned up the volume of the radio, took hold of my hands, and danced me through the house. We whirled through the living room, the dining room, and around the table. Right in the middle of a spin, Mama abruptly stopped. Oh my gosh, we look so much alike. When did that happen? When did you start to grow up? Just look at us, Cece. I bet when you get older, people think we're sisters. Oh, won't that be fun? Look, she giggled and took hold of my hands and spun me in circles until my feet lifted right up off the floor.